right. Happy Friday to you guys. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week and that it ended well. Um, Welcome. My name is 12 Gauge. And first of all, I'd like to start by putting some disclaimers out there. Everything that I say in my videos is strictly my own interpretation of my truth, and all the things that I talk about are alleged. Also, my beliefs and my understanding of the law and procedures and things like that, I try to incorporate those as being factual, not just speculatory. So I hope that if this is your first time to my channel, I hope that you enjoy what I put out. If it's not your first time, I hope that you enjoy coming back and continuing to learn about different areas of true crime. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the IDAHO4 and the similarities that I found in some other cases in the criminal acts. And I said, take one because this might be a series of more than one, or this could be the only one. It depends on how I feel. I've tried to get this video out all week. I just have not been feeling that great. So, you know, it is what it is. First and foremost, I'd like to send my condolences out to the Riley Strain family. He was found today, as most of you already know. Um, I watched a lot of the lives as it was happening this morning, and it was such a somber and sad conclusion to a very thorough searching for an individual. You know, before I start what I'm going to talk about tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about some things, and if it upsets you, then you might look at your own moral compass or your own understanding of the truth about life as you know it. Because I'm not your moral compass, I'm not your truth. Whoa, I'm just basically talking about my understanding as I see it. Okay, first and foremost, this morning when I was watching those lives, I was, good evening, Sabrina. I was listening or actually reading people in the chat asking the dumbest questions. And just because it's dumb to me, I don't, like I said, I'm not anybody's moral compass. Hey, Jeff, how you doing, buddy? I'm going to use one of your videos tonight, so I'm going ahead and giving you props for that. um, I hope you'll see it later on. Um, but as what I was saying, there was people asking about the shirt. There were people asking, well, how did he get that far down there? Um, Things of that nature. You know, at a time like this, when somebody has been found deceased, is not the time to be asking those type of questions. I understand that people are curious. I understand that people want to know what they want to know, and I'm not trying to be anybody's moral compass. I'm just merely stating the facts. That the family, I'm sure, does not appreciate the moment they find their son deceased, that they have to go back and read all this stupidity instead of taking a moment to reflect this young man's life and how tragic it ended. We don't have to know what happened. We don't have to know step by step. I'm sure in time, if they want people to know, they'll put it out there. Sabrina, you and Jeff, don't you agree with that? I mean, let me know one way or the other if y'all agree with that or not. But I think it's pretty right on whenever individuals In the face of tragedy, I guess that's a coping skill. I guess it's people's coping skill that they don't want to look at the truth of the matter because it's bigger than them. But for individuals that have had to deal with a lot of tragedy throughout the years, I um I have, never once asked a question about the individual. You know what I mean? Like my uncle was murdered, his life was taken by two other people. And not once did I ask my aunt when she told me that night, did did he have on his blue jean jacket that he always wore? Did he have his watch on that he always liked to wear? Anything like that, but you get the point. So, tragedy brings out the best in people and it brings out the worst in people. I just merely want to say to the family, if they ever see this, may God hold you close and may your son be looking down on you, knowing how hard you looked for him in his time of need. Jeff, you're right. It says the good book says, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Romans 12:15. Sabrina, you said I completely agree. Sadly, we live in a society where sensitivity gets lost. Yes, I agree. You know, I mean, even with the IDAHO4 case that we're going to discuss tonight, when I first heard about it, I was not thinking about how they were murdered, who did it, how it happened. In my mind, I was thinking those poor parents, they have to find out that their loved ones have been murdered, you know? It's such a tragedy. Such a tragedy. Well, I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer. I'm going to try to go through these things that I have planned for tonight and get through them the best that I can. I have kind of like a allergy thing going on, but I'm going to do my best. If either one of you want to co-host, come on up. I'll let you. Hopefully we get some more people in here. You guys are great. Thank you for being here tonight. Um, I'm going to start off tonight by displaying a case that reminded me so much of the IDAHO4 case, and not a lot has been said about this. Not a lot has been said about this case that I'm about to play to you guys, but the situations were pretty much the same, other than the end result. So, um, I want to discuss that after we watch the video, and I'm gonna go back to Idaho from the very beginning in three videos, and then we're gonna discuss the white Elantra. Okay, I want to discuss the white Elantra, and that's the video that I'm going to use of Jeff's that he compiled on his page that I snatched off his page earlier or his channel earlier, and I'm giving him the cred for it because he did such a great job on it. Um, but before we start, this case that we're about to hear about is about two individuals who were hockey players. They kind of reminded me of Maddie and Kaylee because of their closeness with each other. So, if you've heard about this, good. If you haven't, I'd like to introduce you to these two individuals. I really don't know their names yet. And they were brutally murdered in their Florida home. And let's go ahead and listen to this.
It's very unique in the fact that you had two young lives lost. A senseless double murder sends shockwaves across the nation when two recent college graduates are shot and killed over the weekend.
Relationships and domestic situations can be very, very flammable. It may be best to report it to authorities and let an investigation get started rather than having to deal with a tragedy.
On Saturday, March 16th, police in Miami-Dade, Florida responded to a shots fired call. When they arrived at the scene, first responders found 25-year-old Megan Moore outside, suffering from a gunshot wound. Seconds later, they heard other shots coming from inside the condo. There, they found 23-year-old Sydney Capolino, who had also been shot. Detective Eric Barnes says as soon as the shots fired call came in, first responders sprung into action.
Typically, when you have a shots fired call, that call is going to take precedence over any other call that you have, just because you want to neutralize any threat that still may be present and you want to minimize the loss of life. So, any available officer that's in the area is going to be going to that call.
So they arrived to the scene.
Okay, right quickly, I want to clarify that because a lot of people that I've seen in other cases, they instantly want to attack the police and they're responding how they respond and what they do or what they don't do or what they didn't do or how they should have done this or how they should have done that. Have you heard that detective? He said their job is to neutralize the threat, meaning that you see a girl or you see a lady on the outside the home, she's obviously been shot. You arrive and you hear other gunshots or you've been told there's other gunshots. You get there, it's your job to neutralize the threat because otherwise there's going to be more bodies that you're going to have to explain to higher ups what made you not neutralize that threat. I just wanted to say that because I hear that time and time again. How come they didn't do this? How come they didn't do that? Well, unless you've been a police officer, how come doesn't really mean a hell of beans unless you've been there? Or you get the understanding to finally get in your head, okay, these are the procedures that they follow. Not myths that you've heard other people say. These are the procedures that go along with their training. Meaning that, are they going to be perfect? No. It's kind of like going and getting a job at McDonald's, okay? I'm comparing the police to McDonald work, okay? You get trained at everything you do. Let's say you're working at McDonald's. Well, they train you how to make burgers. But in your case, you get overwhelmed and you start taking shortcuts. Same thing happens in other avenues. Does it make them a bad person? No. It means that sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And does that make it right? No. You should follow the rules and guidelines and procedures that you're given to take. Do people always do it? No, because people are not perfect. There was only one perfect person, and they nailed him to a cross and crucified him. Get that through your head. Let's continue on.
Scene and they find one woman outside with a gunshot wound. And then they hear shots coming from inside while they're on the scene. Is that out of the ordinary that that would still happen as officers are first arriving?
Yes, typically on homicide investigations, when you arrive at the scene, your victim is either transported to the hospital or they're deceased on the scene. Very rarely is there a situation where shots are still being fired. And so that's the kind of the number one rule of arriving at a crime scene. Make sure the scene is safe.
Because of that cardinal rule, Barnes says first responders likely ran past Moore after she'd been shot and straight into the condo.
As soon as the officers arrive at the scene, their first priority is to make sure that it's safe. You also want to, it's a very hard thing to do because as a human being, you see someone suffering and she may possibly still be alive. But in order for you to be able to provide the help and service that she needs, you have to make sure that the scene is safe. So you have to make sure if there's a threat there that you take care of the threat.
Both victims were former teammates on the New England College women's ice hockey team. Moore played 62 games with the team over 3 seasons, and Capolino played 79 games in 4 years. A statement released from New England College reads in part, quote, Megan and Sydney were known to many on campus, and we are deeply saddened by this devastating news. We are keeping Sydney and Megan's families and friends in our thoughts and prayers at this difficult time. Moore graduated from the school in 2021, and Capolino graduated the following year. After that, the friends moved from New Hampshire to Florida. According to police, 40-year-old Louise Napoles shot and killed both women. Moore's parents told local news outlets their daughter was just acquaintances with Napoles, but police report the pair were in a relationship at the time of the shooting. Is it possible that the large age difference between one of the victims and the shooter played a role in this crime?
Yes, that's very possible. When you have two people going through life at different stages of life, it can always lead to problems within a relationship. And so someone that's, about 20 years older than another one could be a indicator of, maybe differences of opinion, and it could contribute to a situation like this.
Barnes says it's also possible infidelity or jealousy contributed to the crime, but it's still too early to tell.
It's one of those things that you don't really know until you take a look into the phones. And the text message and instant message, that's going to be the closest thing the investigator is going to get to interviewing the witness themselves. Sometimes families aren't privy to what's going on inside someone's personal life, so those phones are going to be huge.
While officials have determined Napoles was the shooter, Barnes says investigators must still do their due diligence to make sure no one else was involved.
So in this line of work, you never assume anything. You want to make sure that you cover your bases. Although your crime scene may indicate there was one suspect in the investigation, you always want to leave everything open and be open minded and just work with the facts. So you still have to make sure that, is there some unknown or some blind spot in your investigation?
How would investigators find out that information, whether it was isolated to these three or if there are other people who could, again, be involved?
The way you approach all crime scenes is going to be pretty much uniform. You want to collect as much evidence as possible, starting with like any video or surveillance footage that may be present. You want to talk to every witness that you can. So you start a massive canvas, just knocking on doors, speaking with anyone and everyone who may have seen or heard something. And then at that point, you start to reach out to victims' families.
Okay, did you guys hear that? You said they start canvassing the area, interviewing witnesses, knocking on doors, trying to get people to interview to see if they heard anything, saw anything, or if they were prevalent to any kind of disagreement or argument, anything that may have been heard. This guy is playing it by the book, straightforward. I love the way he's doing this because that's how it should be done. This is the interview process that he's talking about right now. This is not the interrogation. A lot of times people say, well, anytime that there's a witness, that they need to bring them down to the station and interrogate them or, get them to talk. Why? Because they're just a witness to a crime happening. They're not necessarily a suspect. So that's the difference between interviewing somebody and interrogating somebody. He is talking about the interview process and he's doing a great job. I love it.
Figure out what was going on in their lives. And once you've collected all this stuff, you look at the physical evidence at your crime scene. And then at that point, you'll be able to put together a pretty good picture of what's going on.
Barnes says it's also possible there were red flags leading up to the double murder.
It's one of those things that you just never really know how situations are going to turn out. Uh, the best recommendation that I can make is to stay present in the lives of the people that you care about. And if there is something that you think sounds a little strange, it may be best to report it to authorities and let an investigation get started rather than having to deal with a tragedy. I think relationships and domestic situations can be very, very flammable. If someone is having a hard time letting go, or someone's a little too clingy or controlling, those situations are always red flags, and it could be signs that there's danger at the breakup.
But so far, we're still unclear what exactly led up to the shootings. How would they determine what a motive might have been in this case?
I think the motive, in any case, is one of the most significant things. Unfortunately, all the individuals that were involved in this incident are deceased. So investigators will have to work to figure out what the why is, and the only way to determine what the why is by speaking with the loved ones of the victims, just trying to figure out what it was that could have possibly led to this. Maybe coworkers and also maybe neighbors. You know, neighbors would be a great indicator of what the patterns were, the people that lived at the apartment. Have they heard any arguments going on there? You know, just what was the day to day life like of the individuals that are now deceased?
Will investigators also be looking to find whether this was a crime of passion, like heat of the moment, or if this was something that was premeditated?
I think that investigators will work to try to figure out what caused it. I know they will probably take a deep dive into the electronic aspect of this. Most people today live off cell phones and social media. So I would be interested into, you know, was there any messages on the social media or any text messages that went back and forth prior to the suspect showing up? You know, and I think that the motive of, what caused this is huge because the family's going to want to know.
Authorities say Napoles shot and killed himself after shooting both Moore and Capolino. As the investigation continues, officials will talk to those closest to him and the victims.
At this point, since the person of interest or suspect is deceased, the detectives and investigators are pretty much working for the families. They're working to close any gaps of information, just figuring out the why this happened. And so once they're able to check the boxes and determine why this happened, the investigation itself is over with.
And if someone watching finds themselves in a domestic violence situation with a partner or a friend, whatever it may be, what are things that they should do to protect themselves?
I would say someone that is dealing with a domestic situation, the best thing that they could do is to think for themselves and to think about their own safety and well-being. Sometimes situations like this can turn flammable overnight. It can one argument, one text message, and it just turns to an unpredictable situation. And sometimes things move really fast. So the best thing to do is just to kind of get distance from those situations and to put yourself in a safe and positive situation.
While
Very compelling information right there. You know, he said a lot of things. He said they had to differentiate whether it was a premeditated murder or whether it was a crime of passion. And he also said when it comes to relationships, it can it can go very bad very quickly. And my purpose in showing this tonight is to kind of lead into the Idaho 4 because a lot of times in the beginning it was referenced to being a crime of passion. It was discussed that they really didn't have a motive. Um, that they didn't know if the house was attacked or if the people that lived in the house were attacked. Um, I could be wrong at any of this stuff that I'm recalling because my head's kind of hazy right now. But if I am, just hang with me. Don't attack me. Um, and I'm trying to pay attention while that dog keeps barking in the background. I apologize for that. Hopefully it's not that loud. You know, one thing that I thought of as the detective was talking in that one that I've never really thought of before. And I'm going to incorporate this into the next series that I bring up about the Idaho 4. Um, it said that this individual was 40 years old, seeing a 20 something year old person. Well, at first they said they weren't a couple, but then later on they said, well, they were romantically involved. And they suspected infidelity might have been a problem in that relationship. So that's what could have caused the situation to go as it did. Think of that a minute. Think about that a minute. I'm not speculating on the Idaho 4. I'm just putting these thoughts out there to show you how quickly certain things can happen. I'm not saying Brian was involved with any of the roommates or the ones that were deceased. I'm not saying any of that. But if there was somebody else that was seeing one of these girls Did they get jealous? You know, this day and age, and this is something that I hope that a lot of you understand too, is 2024 is not like any other time that, 2024 is not like any other time that we can remember. Even the early 2022s. Females, and I'm not downing them because they're not all like this. There's my disclaimer. Not all females, but there's certain females that started using social media as a means to gain money, to gain monetary value by getting on Instagram, getting on OnlyFans, getting on Snapchat, getting on YouTube, getting on all these social platforms, being a model. You know, um, I have a lot of friends, and I've experienced it myself that you run across females that don't work. They have a lot of issues going on, but their only focus in life is gaining money. Money to feed their lifestyle, whatever that lifestyle might be. So, that case that I just told you about, that we just heard on, what if this older gentleman was giving that female that he was supposedly dating money to get her nails done, to pay her cell phone, maybe pay some rent because they just graduated college. So, unless they had a great job, they wouldn't have been able to finance a lot. And if you've ever been through college, you understand once you graduate, you have a lot of debt, you have a lot of things that you got to get in order, and this, that, and the other. Well, what if this individual was the control that he had over this 20-year different individual in his life was financial? Maybe they were friends with benefits and he financed it. Maybe he was the financier of certain benefit that were being given. And I'm not trying to talk bad about the victim. I'm really not. You know, um, I'm just calling it how it is in most situations in this world today. There's some women that will let you pay for everything, but they won't be anything more with you. They won't go to dinner with you. They won't come over and hang out. They won't make it official with you, but they're constantly keeping in contact with you for whatever reason. And the reason I bring this up is because it's another area that I started thinking about as far as the Idaho 4. I read the other day somebody said, well, my content was cool until I started talking about other cases because they were just here to listen to the Idaho 4. Well, I'm going to tell you this. I'm not going to talk about Idaho 4 every day because it makes you insane and it makes you feel like you're lost for reality is somewhere out there because there's not enough out there to continue to talk about that hasn't been talked about. The only reason I'm talking about it tonight is because we're going back in time. I want to talk about the very first newscast that was broadcast, and we're going to go down that avenue. So here we go. Here's one of the first ones that I could find on the internet.
And welcome to this early edition of the Sunday News at 5. I'm Doug Petcash. We begin with breaking news out of North Idaho. Students at the University of Idaho were asked to shelter in place earlier today. The University of Idaho says Moscow police are investigating a homicide on King Road, which, as you can see, is very close to campus. They say police don't have a suspect yet. Around 4 o'clock, the university posted on social media that the Moscow Police Department doesn't believe there is an active threat. The school has lifted the shelter-in-place requests, but asks people to remain vigilant. Just after 1 o'clock today, the university had sent an alert asking students to stay away from the area and to shelter in place. Again, that shelter in place has been lifted. According to the Spokesman Review, Moscow police say the initial call was for an unconscious person, and police are now investigating it as a homicide. We'll continue to update this story as we learn more.
Okay. So, very short, very sweet, very brief. Shelter in place lifted, shelter in place given, and then there was no suspect, there was no threat to the community. So, if you remember right off the bat when you heard about this case, I don't know how long it was before you guys started actively looking in and, really taking notice of this case and what was going on. I really didn't get involved until like after Thanksgiving, because I saw another newscast somewhere. I don't know if I was traveling, saw it on a TV in an airport or something. I was like, man, they still haven't caught who did that, you know? And it was just really sad to me that this could happen. This next one is going to be the timeline. It's going to be a visual timeline that I want you guys to pay attention to, and I want you to listen to some of the things that were said early on that may have been twisted, contorted, taken off on rabbit holes, this, that, and the other, and we'll go from there.
On November 13th, 2022, these 4 university students were discovered stabbed in their home in Moscow, Idaho. Local police described the case as very complex, and it took more than 6 weeks for a suspect to be arrested. We pieced together information from a case affidavit released by authorities, verified publicly available evidence, and pulled in ABC News reporting to create a visual timeline outlining significant events in this case. I'm Emmanuel Saliba, a senior reporter with ABC News. It's around 9 p.m. local time on Saturday, November 12th in Moscow, Idaho. According to an affidavit released by authorities, Zana Kernodle and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin are seen hanging out at the Sigma Chi house. It's about a 5-minute walk from their off-campus house on King Road. Zana's roommates Kaylee Gonsalves and Madison Mogan are at the Corner Club. It's a historic sports bar in town. They stay at the bar for about 3 hours, according to an affidavit released by authorities. And around 1:30 a.m., Kaylee and Maddie leave the corner bar. The next available images we have of them are in this surveillance footage obtained by ABC News. They're heading towards a local food truck, which is about a 6-minute walk from the bar. Police say this man with them is not a suspect. This is the grub truck. They have been streaming live on Twitch since about 10 p.m. And around 1:41 a.m., we see all 3 of them walk into frame. Maddie and Kaylee order food.
Have a good night. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thanks. I think I would like the carbonara.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Absolutely.
How many more do you need? That's the second one? Awesome.
Dawn's mom.
And then you said
$10 for
Perfect. Cool. Thank you.
it. 47. Thank you very much.
They wait around for about 10 minutes. Around 1:51 a.m., they grab food from the truck window and walk out of frame. Police confirm that at this point they get picked up by a car service, and about 6 minutes later, they arrive at home on King Road. According to an affidavit, Ethan and Zana are already in the house along with 2 other roommates. 2:47 a.m. According to police, a phone belonging to the suspect, Brian Koberger, stops connecting to the cell network in nearby Pullman, Washington. This is where he lives and studies criminology as a PhD student at Washington State University. 2:53 a.m. Authorities say a white sedan consistent with a vehicle registered to Koberger is seen traveling towards the highway that connects Pullman and Moscow. It's only about a 10-mile drive between the two cities. At 3:29 a.m., surveillance footage obtained by police from the King Road neighborhood captures a white sedan making an initial drive by the victim's house. Authorities say this car will make another 2 passes in the next 30 minutes. It's 4 a.m. According to the affidavit, Zana receives a DoorDash delivery. And a source tells ABC News that the delivery is contactless and the order is left at the front door.
Okay, let's stop right there. Okay, 3:47. His phone stopped pinging. All right. So in 30 minutes, once he reaches Moscow, 30-minute driving around the house, this, that, and the other, at 4 a.m., Dana receives a DoorDash. So at 4 a.m., and we see a car on the Linda Lane footage at 4:05. So one thing that's always troubled me when I first heard about this is how did the DoorDash driver not see Koberger in those 5-minute time frames? Because if he dropped off the food, I'm sure he just didn't take off. I'm sure, if, you know, I was thinking about this. It's like, okay, you drop off the food at 4 a.m. Yeah, I've looked into Unfiltered Lucky stuff too. He's pretty good. Um, you drop off the food 4 a.m. It takes you probably a minute and a half to get back into your vehicle. 4:01. Unless your vehicle is running, you have to start it up. So 4:03. So if that car that we see on the Linda Lane footage at 4:05, is it the DoorDash driver making a U-turn, or is it the white Elantra that passed the DoorDash driver? And how did the DoorDash driver get out? You get what I'm saying? It's like if it's the 4:05 car and they're there around that same time. See, nobody's ever talked about this. How did both cars get out of there? You hear me? Because if we look at the map, and I'll put the map up countless times, so I'm sure you have in your own head what the map looks like around the Queen Road apartments. As you're driving east toward Linda Lane, that would be one car. So if you have Brian's car coming in after him, even if it's 5 minutes, there's no way that those two cars could have gotten off that street without running into each other. And as you recall, there was a lot of cars parked along the street. So how could two cars get off that street if there's only one way in, one way out? Because there's literally no other way. There's no other way to get in and out. And I always thought that at the very beginning. I thought, well, if he showed up at this time and the DoorDash driver was there, I didn't realize how the setup was. But since seeing all this stuff and watching these just now, it's like my mind always thinks of something different or sees something different. Based on the camera footage, all these other things. And you know how we've heard that the DoorDash driver supposedly lived 1,200 feet from Koberger and Pullman, and all the things that we heard about him and how he fingered Brian in the car? What if, in the process of them passing each other, their DoorDash driver recognized Brian? What if they had a couple words like, "Hey, bro, what's up, man? What are you doing here this time of night?" What if there was an actual conversation? Or just a head nod, you know? Like sometimes you see people, you're like, "Hey, hey." Because think about it, there's no way that this person, the DoorDash driver and Brian, could have exit because Brian was driving around that area. He was driving around. And 405 and some change, and supposedly that white Elantra comes on the Linda Lane footage. Then what did the DoorDash driver do? Go up King Road, bust a U, or done a three-point turn and take off while Brian passed him? He still couldn't have passed him on that narrow ass road right there. I mean, he would have ran into him like making the if he went up King, the DoorDash driver went up King, and Brian passed and ended up at the Linda Lane at 405 to turn around. Even if the DoorDash turned around right there at King Road, right by the house, did a three-point turn, and then took off, he still would have seen the taillights behind him. And I've never thought about this until just now. It's just weird. And I could be totally off. I mean, I'm sure there's been other people that have looked at this in and out and probably, going to debunk my stuff. But it just, to me, it doesn't seem possible that this would be an area that would be easy for two cars around the same time to get out of. Because Brian was going supposedly, once he went up to Linda Lane and turned back around, he went back down all the way around again because the murders didn't start until what? 407, something like that? 409, something like that. So 405, that would have been 4 minutes to drive around and come back and park. My whole thing is, why didn't he park the first time when he came up? Or as he was going around Linda Lane those three times? Why didn't he park then? At 3:45, and we talked about this on another live, there was supposedly a car going the wrong car at the wrong time. And I don't want to keep bringing that up because that's just irrelevant to me. But, you know, what if the car that was going the wrong way at the wrong time was not the white Elantra? What if it was another car? What if it was 3:45? So they don't say that. I mean, they say she received a DoorDash. She received a DoorDash at 4 o'clock. Let me go back to this because I don't like misquoting stuff. who received a DoorDash order at the residence at approximately 4 a.m. So approximate could be 3:59, 3:58, 4:01, 4:02. So that, I mean, that in itself, approximate. It didn't say she received an order at directly 4 o'clock, like a lot of people have trying to say. You know, a lot of people I've heard have tried to say that. She got the order at 4 o'clock. She got it at 4 o'clock. So therefore, this, that, and the other. No, it said approximately. Approximately. That means in the general vicinity of that time. So if it was before 4 o'clock and Brian was doing all that, going through the neighborhoods and all this other stuff, you have to wonder, what direction did the DoorDash driver come from? How did he come into the neighborhood from Pullman? Did he go down Walenta on the other side and then to King Road and then in front of the house? Because supposedly this DoorDash driver had delivered a lot of DoorDash to that house before. So he was familiar with the residents. So let's keep going. A little something for you to think about.
Left at the front door. A surviving roommate would later tell authorities that around this time, 4 a.m., she wakes up to what sounds like Kaylee playing with her dog in the room on the third floor. She also reports hearing someone say, "There's someone here." 4:04 a.m., authorities say the white sedan is seen driving into the neighborhood a fourth time. 4:12 a.m., according to phone records obtained by police.
There it is, 4:04. White vehicle seen driving into the area for the third time. So already, 4:04, okay? Approximately 4 o'clock, that food was dropped off. You can't tell me that that DoorDash driver did not see that white vehicle. Whether it's an Elantra, whether it's a Sonata, whether it's a Prius, whether it's a Taurus, or whatever it is, you cannot tell me that that DoorDash driver did not see that white vehicle or even try to get out of the way because it was driving through the neighborhood. Those neighborhoods are narrow. Let's continue on.
Zana is awake and using TikTok. The affidavit states that the same surviving roommate says she hears what sounds like crying coming from Zana's room. She opens her door a second time and says she hears a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." At 4:17 a.m., this security camera on a neighbor's home picks up distorted audio of what sounds like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times. This camera is less than 50 feet from Zana's bedroom. The affidavit states the surviving roommate then opens her door a third time. She sees a masked man walking past her towards the sliding glass door in the kitchen. In frozen shock, she locks her door. 4:20 a.m., police say the white sedan is seen leaving the neighborhood at a high rate speed. 5:25 a.m., authorities say that same vehicle is seen on 5 cameras back in the Pullman area, near where the suspect lives. And then, between 9:12 and 9:21 a.m., police say data collected shows the suspect's phone appearing near the scene of the murders. About 8 hours after the killings, a 911 call reports an unconscious person at the scene of the crime. Shortly after, Moscow police discover the bodies of 4 students.
The facts of the case that we know right now.
November 16th, police reveal the 4 victims were stabbed to death.
The 4 were stabbed with a knife, but no weapon has been located at this time.
We are eternally grateful that we spent so much time with him.
This is Ethan's mom on November 30th at a vigil honoring her son and the 3 other victims.
That's the most important message that we have for you and your families, is to make sure that you spend as much time as possible with those people, because time is precious and it's something you can't get back.
We're looking for a 2011 to a 2013 Hyundai Elantra.
December 7th, no suspects have been publicly identified, and Moscow police appeal to the public for help.
Any assistance you can give us, anybody that owns one, anybody that knows of someone who owns one or may have been driving one, if you could get a hold of us through our tip line or call us directly, we'd appreciate that.
Okay, when he pleads out and says, we're looking for a Hyundai Elantra, 2011, 2013. Let's say that for some miracle, the DoorDash driver didn't bump into him. But yet he lives 1,200 feet from him and he knows that this is who drives this Elantra. Aren't you going to kind of be looking at this guy, especially if your wife is telling you that he's creepy and all the things that you've heard up to this point? I have a friend that just came down from Spokane, and she told me that this was all anybody talked about. This is all everybody talked about. Forever. And after she had a theory and she said, well, you're the one that's investigating the case. You should know. So she wouldn't even tell me anything, which is kind of fucked up, I thought, but whatever. Anyways, you continue at 5:25. He rolls into Pullman. He's caught on camera by his house.
December 15th, Koberger and his father are driving eastbound on I-70 when they get pulled over by a Hancock County Sheriff's deputy.
Hello. How you doing? How y'all doing today? Good, good. Take a look at your driver's license real quick if I could. See, he's right up on that van, man. He was right up on the back end of that van. So you're coming from Washington State University, and you're going where? Oh.
We're going to be going to Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yep. We're slightly punchy because we're driving for hours.
Hours, days.
Hours.
They're driving across the country to their family home in Pennsylvania.
Okay. So do me a favor and don't follow too close, okay?
10 minutes later, they are pulled over again, but this time by Indiana State Police. Both departments would later say they had no identifying information on the suspect at the time of these stops or the alleged vehicle involved. The Indiana State Police added in another statement that its agency wasn't directed by the FBI to make the traffic stop. 15 days later, Koberger is arrested in Pennsylvania. The FBI identified the suspect by linking DNA evidence from the crime scene to a public genealogy database. January 3rd, he is extradited back to Idaho, where he is charged with felony burglary and 4 counts of first-degree murder. In a statement, his extradition lawyer in Pennsylvania said his client was eager to be exonerated. The suspect remains in custody, awaiting his next court appearance in June.
Okay, there you have it. There's the timeline. So what do y'all think about that? I mean, there's nothing new, so it's nothing like, jaw-dropping, gonna give you something that another channel not giving you, other than I'm not seeing things in shadows and, putting filters to certain things so that you can see what I see. The one thing that I want to respect Jeff in doing, Jeff H., I'm giving you another shout out, is that whenever you do your videos, they're objective. You're not putting thoughts in people's heads as you're editing your stuff. And I think that's credible. That's credible. So that was a visual timeline up to the arrest. Did you see or hear anything different than maybe you've envisioned up until this time? The only thing that really got me thinking different was the DoorDash. Because I've heard so much stuff, I've seen so much stuff that it just muddies the water. You know, it gets you to thinking too that if something ever happened to you, do you want people wasting their time with these speculatory things, or do you want them to spend their effort in trying to find if something tragic such as a murder or whatever, you want them to spend their time trying to find a killer, right? You don't want people speculating that the housekeeper did it or the lawn man did it or, the UPS guy who delivered a package did it. You don't want them spending time on all these people living their daily lives as potential suspects. I mean, it's just tragic. I remember a channel I followed because I respected her reporting, and I still do. It's called Grizzly True Crime. I remember when this case was very first right off the bat, I was listening to her, and she was breaking down everything, and she was talking about the Jacks, the two Jacks, and Adam, and all these other characters that were in place. And there was a lot of people with the same name. She talked about the two Daves. She was talking about the sorority, the fraternity. She was talking about all that stuff. And she broke it down in a way that it made a lot of sense, but it still left a lot of questions because in reality, people don't have all the answers. Even as smart as everybody is on true crime, because I believe almost probably 75% of people who are doing this coverage have some sense of background where they can apply their knowledge to put things together so that they don't sound like they're being full of conspiracy. And then there's the other 25% who just appear to not care. They're the ones that are blatantly going to tell you all these conspiracies, they're going to drag in everybody that they can find who has a tie of 6 degrees of separation between any of the roommates or of the deceased. You know, I'm about to play you another video, but before I do so, I want you to think about what Ethan's mom said. She said, hold your people close because life can change in a blink of an eye. No truer statement. We see it every day with all the cases that are put on YouTube, on the news, all these things. And unfortunately, we become a society that cannot handle tragedy without romanticizing it or sensationalizing it or whatever you want to do. I mean, there's channels on here there's creators that cuss at their subs, there's channels that yell at their subs, there's people that talk about their private parts, there's people that do all this stuff, and people flock to these channels because it's a Jerry Springer episode to them, it's entertainment. I believe that mine is entertaining to the point where all I'm not doing is yelling Jerry, 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 and asking Steve to break up a fight. But let's move on to the next video. I really have a bad taste in my mouth about YouTube today for some reason. It's like people fighting about the dumbest shit. It's like watching high schoolers bicker the closer school gets to getting out. It's like you've seen people so long. They used to be buddy buddies. Now they can't stand each other. Now they throw digs at each other and all this other stuff. It's just crazy. Here's another video that I found. It says Idaho murders. Who was the real target? Let's go ahead and watch this.
The Idaho murder case suggests that Maddie Mogen, not Kaylee Gonsalves, was Brian Koberger's alleged target. Several long-held questions about the quadruple homicide were answered this weekend when some of the victims' families sat down with 48 hours. Who was killed first? Was there a connection to the killer? What happened the morning the bodies were found? It has always been my assumption that the perpetrator went to 1122 King Road on November 13th with the goal of killing one person, most likely Kaylee or Maddie. Based on all the evidence currently out there, I always lean more towards Kaylee, but now I am not so sure. Kaylee's own family is revealing never before heard details about the crime scene and the alleged killer that points directly to Maddie Mogen as the target. Kaylee's parents and her sister Olivia have been outspoken advocates for their daughter and the three victims since day one. So outspoken at times that members of the public have criticized them for getting in the way of the investigation. But from the moment a deputy showed up on their doorstep at 4 p.m. on November 13th to tell them that Kaylee was murdered, the Gonsalves family mobilized to help find her killer. And one of the things they did early on was speak to the coroner, who gave them details that up until this point I had never heard, details about the crime scene. Now, I'm sure you're wondering how this was all able to happen with the current gag order in place. The gag order covers the attorneys and the investigators, but it doesn't prohibit families from speaking out. The coroner is covered by this gag order, but the Gonsalves family spoke to Coroner Kathy Mabbitt prior to it being put in place by the judge. Now, from the onset of the investigation, police were firm in their opinion that the crime was targeted, but they never said who the target was.
The bed was up against the wall. The headboard was touching the wall, and the left side of the bed was touching the wall. And we believe that Maddie was on the outside and Kaylee was on the inside.
According to Coroner Mabbitt, the killer's first victim was Maddie, says Steve.
And then from Maddie, he moved on to your daughter.
This is huge. Up to this point, investigators have never confirmed the order of the killings. If what the Gonsalves claim the coroner told them is true, and it was Maddie, we might have our biggest clue yet about the intended target, which may lead us to motive. We have known for a while that the murders started on the third floor with Kaylee and Maddie. Surviving roommate Dylan said she woke up around 4 a.m. to what sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog on the third floor, followed by one of the girls upstairs saying someone's here. At this point, we know Xana was still alive on the second floor, having gotten a DoorDash around that time, plus she was active on TikTok at 4:13 a.m. when Kaylee and Maddie were likely being stabbed to death a floor above. By all accounts, it seems that the killer silently slipped into the house from that back sliding glass door and made a beeline for the bedrooms on the third floor, indicating that he expected his primary target to be there that night. Kaylee and Maddie were up there, sleeping in the same bed. Even though Kaylee lived in the house, she had actually moved out already because she was graduating. She was just there visiting for the weekend. So let's imagine this, the way Kaylee's mom describes it. One side of Maddie's bed was up against the wall with Maddie sleeping on the outside, putting Kaylee between her and the wall. Now, in this configuration, Maddie would have been the first person that the killer had access to upon entering the room, and he would have needed to lean or climb over her in order to get to Kaylee. Now, the Gonsalves said that they uncovered evidence that Kaylee had tried to get out of the situation but was trapped. They didn't expand on what that means, but it could mean defensive wounds or just kind of how her body was positioned on the mattress. The knife sheath was also dropped to the right of Maddie's body with the killer's DNA on the snap. That always felt to me like this is where the murders began, that the killer snuck in, unsnapped the sheath, and pulled the knife out for the first time, dropping the sheath in the process, effectively marking his start point. Now, the sheath was discovered by investigators on the mattress, partially underneath of Maddie's body. So I really do think he dropped it right when he unsheathed the knife for the first time. Does Maddie Mogen being the first victim killed mean that she was the intended target? Not necessarily. It could simply be that the way they were sleeping, she was just the first one the killer got to. But Kaylee's parents revealed more circumstantial evidence pointing directly towards Maddie. When Brian Koberger was arrested on December 30th, it was the first time anyone had heard his name, including the families of the victims. Investigators had never tipped their hand that they even had a suspect. But as soon as the Gonsalves family heard the suspect's name, they tried to find him on social media, and they came across this account.
From our investigation of the account, it appeared to be the real Brian Koberger account.
The one they claim was the real deal is this one that is one of many that have been floating around Reddit for months. It had one post, 1,943 followers, and was following 99 accounts. Some of them, according to the Gonsalveses, were Koberger's known relatives.
Maddie's Instagram account and look at her pictures, and he liked them.
This statement made alarm bells go off in my head the second I heard it. Notice she didn't say that the account interacted with Kaylee's photos or Xana's photos, just Maddie's. Sources had previously told People magazine that Koberger followed all 3 of the female victims on social media, but had repeatedly messaged only one of them. And now I'm wondering if that person was the same one who had photos that he liked. A source also told the outlet that Koberger's phone contained multiple images of one of the victims. And again, I am wondering if the evidence will show that those photos were of Maddie. Olivia Gonsalves also had access to her sister Kaylee's phone and call logs, which she turned over to the police. So I have to imagine if she went through her sister's phone and found a bunch of unanswered messages from some guy, she would have mentioned it to the police and probably again in this interview. Now, according to authorities, Koberger showed up repeatedly outside of the victim's home prior to the murders, starting as far back as August 21st, when his phone pinged a tower covering the area near 1122 King Road. Logically, if Koberger was allegedly stalking the house, which is down that random back road, he would have had to have come in contact with the girls before that in order to figure out where they lived. There has been an unsubstantiated rumor flying around for months that the suspect would frequent the Mad Greek restaurant where 2 of the victims worked, Xana and Maddie. Now, the restaurant has denied this, but I've actually eaten there and I'm positive that the owners wouldn't remember me, so I think it's plausible maybe they just didn't remember him. This is likely the place where he first came across these 2 victims. He's a vegan, they serve vegan food, and there's a limited amount of that in the area. Now, Koberger was enrolled in nearby Washington State University, not the University of Idaho where the victims went. But one of the victims did have a connection to WSU, and this time it's not Maddie. Xana Kernodle's older sister, Jasmine, was a senior at WSU. Now, like Xana, Jasmine majored in marketing, so it seems unlikely that her undergrad classes would have overlapped with Koberger's graduate ones, but it's just worth mentioning that they went to the same school. Jasmine and her father also spoke to 48 Hours and divulged new information about the hours after the murders. 911 wasn't called until noon the next day, but along with the police, Jasmine was contacted by Xana's friends. There were multiple people already at the house when 911 was finally called. In addition to the surviving roommates, Bethany and Dylan, police said that several other people were there and that neither of the survivors made the 911 call, though it was made from one of their phones. It's never been explained whether they were there because other roommates had guests in their rooms the night before, which is one possibility. The other, which is a theory that has been floated in Reddit threads, is that Ethan's 2 siblings were called before the police. Now, he was a triplet, and both his brother and sister were students at the University of Idaho. Now, along with the Chapins, it would make sense to me for some of Ethan's Sigma Chi brothers to have been called because they were just close by. You can actually see the Sigma Chi frat house from 1122 King Road. Why all of these people were at the house before cops were called is a huge mystery, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And by the time Xana's sister Jasmine got there from Pullman, police had already arrived and closed the crime scene. Now, as we have discussed many times before, the scene was one of the bloodiest ones that police had ever witnessed. With so many people in the house before cops got there, it's pretty shocking that there wasn't blood tracked all over the house or even out here on this cement patio. I don't know what to make of that other than just assuming that the group was either smart enough or unfortunately traumatized enough not to walk into the blood-soaked rooms before cops got there. But as to why the killer didn't leave a blood trail, the Gonsalveses think he had what's called a kill kit.
I think he had a backpack.
A change of clothes. We don't know if it was coveralls, pants, hoodie. We don't know.
This means he would have had minutes, maybe seconds to change out of the clothes he wore into clean ones between the time Dylan heard crying in Xana's room and then seeing the killer walking out of the house. Now, the murder weapon and those bloody clothes have never been found. Search Daily Mail videos on Facebook for more clips like this. For more true crime content like this, hit like and subscribe.
Okay, so that was just a blast from the past as well. It kind of took you back to who the intended target was. And everybody kind of was on board that Maddie was the target. She was killed first. Um, but one thing that I heard is the pieces of the puzzle that the media was putting together. He must have met them at the Mad Greek because he was a vegan. Do you see how people get in their mindset how certain things fall into place? He must have done this because of this, because of that, because of this, because of that, equals he killed them. I'm not saying that he didn't. I'm not one of those people that's saying that he didn't. I'm not saying that he's guilty or innocent. I'm just trying to think in my head logically what's what all this means, even so much time that has passed. If you had never heard any of this before, and I'm playing it for you tonight as if it's happening today, where does your mind go? Can you empty your head enough to look at this logically without anybody's interpretation, without anybody um, feeding your head with theories and speculations and all this other stuff? Take a moment, clear your head. We're about to look at the white car. This is brought to you by Jeff H. Once again, thank you, Jeff. I know I've thanked you more than once already, but thank you again. Let's see what this is all about. 34 seconds.
All these police cars out and everybody in that house, 6 people live there. They've not believe that there is a current ongoing threat. People do not have to shelter in place.
All these police cars out and everybody in that house, 6 people live there. They not believe that there is a current ongoing threat. People do not have to shelter in place.
Okay, I chose this one because I remember seeing that. I remember seeing that early on that there was a white car that cruised one way and then cruised the other way. So, Jeff, if you're still in here, the first time that that car went by heading east, that car was going the wrong way at the wrong time. And then it turned around, so I guess it butted a U in that driveway. Then it started heading west. But regardless, I'd like to know, I'd like for you to zoom in a little bit more on that video if you could, and really tell if it was an Elantra or not. Because it looks like one. It's a white car, and it's kind of slowing down, like driving around. And I saw another one today. It was the lime green car that was driving around the house as it was being torn down. And I was thinking to myself, man, that's kind of. And everybody was going crazy with that one. They're going crazy with that one. There's the killer. He's driving around the house, and the car's been wrapped. But I want to take you into this that I found, or this that, I mean, I've seen a lot of this stuff already, and I'm sure you have in time. But this is not that one. This one. Well, not that one either. Let's see which one's up. Okay. This is heartbreaking. Internet finds Kaylee Gonzalez post from October about moving to Austin with her dog. let's see what it says. It says Austin roommates. It says looking for a roommate to move in with me from February to June. I'm coming from Idaho, so I'm not familiar with the area, so open to living anywhere in the Austin area. I'm a 21-year-old girl with a really sweet 20-pound dog. If anyone is looking for a place from February to June in Austin, let me know. So sad she never got to make it. And this other one that I found is the last text message received on Kaylee's phone. I don't know if y'all have seen this. It says Idaho murders victims' last unanswered text from family revealed. It says Kaylee Gonsalves family revealed message before anniversary of stabbings. A day before she died, Kaylee Gonsalves had an impromptu photography session with her roommate and best friend, Maddie Mogan, on the porch of their rental home in the town of Moscow, just a short walk from the University of Idaho. With all her credits earned and graduation looming close, Kaylee was planning to go on a backpacking trip to Europe ahead of beginning her new job in Austin. So she was planning on graduating, taking a month backpacking tour, and then going to Austin in February. On that last trip to Moscow, Kaylee intended to squeeze any extra time she could with Maddie, say goodbye to her other housemate, and pack the belongings she had left behind. She made plans to go out with Maddie on the evening of the 12th of November and sent a playful picture of herself carrying her best friend on her shoulders to her parents. The promise of all the exciting things the future had to come clear in the beaming smiles. A cheerful emoji and "hey" in the reply the following day would never be answered. By the time that last message got to her phone on the afternoon of the 13th of November, Kaylee, Maddie, and her roommate and friend, Dana Cornado, and Dana's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, were laying dead in different rooms in the house. The revelation about that final text was made by Kaylee's family on their Facebook family page a year after their daughter and her three friends were brutally murdered. Suspect Brian Koberger was arrested 7 weeks after the stabbing, but with no foreseeable trial date ahead, the families are navigating the grim anniversary by choosing to focus on their children's legacy. Steve Gonsalves, Kelly's father, has refused to use the term anniversary altogether. To him, 13th of November is an opportunity to highlight the impact his daughter made in her short life, to remind others about the beauty of her heart, and to share how proud he is to even been her father. And there's the message right there. It says, hey. I think another thing that people forget is they were so young. Because at 21, 22 years old, you feel that you got the world by the tail. And you don't. You still are clueless to a lot of things that are going on in the world. And here's another question for you. I know the lighting is bad, but the best I can do at this time. I don't feel like messing with the other stuff. Here's another question I have for you. If Maddie was the intended target, wouldn't she have had a stalker? Wouldn't they have been speaking about a stalker with Maddie instead of Kaylee? Wouldn't they have been saying, Maddie has a stalker? This guy was constantly following Maddie around. This guy was constantly in the Mad Greek, creeping her out, making gestures, asking for a phone number, trying to talk to her, trying to talk to Xana. Wouldn't that have been some of the things discussed? But no, we learned that Kaylee had a supposed stalker. And you can be stalked in a lot of different ways. I've put some other videos on my page about stalking that are very, very traumatic if you're not mindful of it. Um, I hope you enjoyed this tonight. A walk down the past and maybe looking at and hearing things that you haven't heard in quite a while. That first newscast kind of got to me because it was probably one of the first ones ever aired, just short, sweet, 4 University of Idaho students murdered in their off campus home. Not really a lot of information. It's so sad, even to this point. I think we've gotten desensitized with all the information that's either been leaked, been debunked, all the trolls and all the people that came out with their information and all this and that and the other. Another thing that I heard on one of those videos that I played tonight, how could people have been there so quickly in the morning if they hadn't already been in the house? Like they were with the surviving roommates. We haven't ever heard that there's been more people that were in that house. We just assumed that there were just 2 surviving roommates. Maybe they had 2 guys over, 2 more, a guy and a girl, and then Bethany had a couple people over. And they heard all this stuff going on, and instead of leaving, they stayed all night. And in the morning, they felt brave enough to text each other and venture out and find what they find, and then they go into shock. I don't know how I would act if I found a dead body, much less a bloody crime scene. But I sure would not be blaming it on people that have no road to lead to them. People have speculation. That's understandable. Like I said at the very beginning, I'm not the moral police, but I can discuss this on my channel. If you see something you don't understand it's okay to talk about it, but try not to speculate that there's something nefarious going on because you don't understand it. In the Riley Strain case, I heard today, this lady, her name is Michelle After Dark. That's a pretty cool channel. I listened to her this morning. Shout out to you, Michelle. One of her viewers said, "Is there a fence? Or shouldn't there be a fence down by that river?" And Michelle said something to the effect of, "So and so, can you not see the brick 4-foot fence all along that wall right there? Don't come at me like that." That's what she said, like something like that. And that is so, so true. It's kind of like people get in the chats and they forget to watch what you're showing. I was watching the newscast of the sergeant discussing Riley's being found, him wearing the shirt, him wearing the Apple Watch, him wearing the clothing that he was wearing on the camera footage. And there was people in the chat asking, was he wearing the shirt? Did he have the Apple Watch on? How was the debit card and the phone found on the side if he had those stuff on him? I'm going to end his case with this. Then I'm going to move on to something else. I don't know if I'll do any Idaho stuff until something breaking comes about. I don't have anything up my sleeve where I can actually tell you, hey, hang in there because in a couple of months I got some amazing thing I'm going to bring out to you because I don't. But with the Riley case, if you've ever been in college or if you've ever been a part of a group of people that drink excessively and you're around people before you go out, you're pre-flighting, you're drinking. By the time you get to the bar, you could be very well intoxicated. And the fact that it takes an hour and 45 minutes for an ounce of alcohol to filter through your body, no telling how much alcohol he had, if he had any other substances in his body. But regardless, to the fact is, people get stuck on certain dates that are said. It's kind of like they get told he was served one drink and 2 glasses of water. Well, in their mind, they can't wrap their head around that. How could he be so intoxicated off of one drink and 2 glasses of water? And what was he kicked out for? What was he doing? Why wasn't the bartender looking at him closer? You know, when you go into those crowded bars, and even the restaurants that have bars in them, the bartender doesn't even notice you unless he brings you the drink. Well, somebody noticed him enough to kick him out. But in reality, you have to use your common sense if you have any. Don't let these creators make up your mind for you, including myself. You know, I'm just talking. Does that mean that my word is law? Obviously not, because people don't come over here for my content very much. So obviously they don't trust in what I have to say, which is cool. I'm thankful for the people that stick around, the people that come into the chat. I'm thankful for you guys that comment, that have intellectual mindsets where you can look outside the box and not necessarily get tunnel visioned into this must be it. This must be it. I don't want to be one of those creators that has to get ugly with his subs and tell them how dumb they are and how their thoughts are stupid and this and that and the other, because you know what? You're all entitled to your own opinion, but just be a lot more reflective on what you say before you say it, because it could be harmful to somebody who's reading it month down the road, years down the road. You know, his family could be reading that stuff. Like, they just found their son, pulled him out of the river, and instead of saying, you know, our condolences, we offer our prayers, we offer this, that, and the other, people are asking about how he died. What did you see? Was he bloated? Did his eyes popped out of his head? Do you have worms out of his ears? I mean, I'm shocked that it hasn't gotten that bad yet, but I'm sure it will. I'm sure there'll be people that eventually get brave enough to be talking like that. You know, I'm glad there was enough exposure for this individual to be continue to be looked for, because oftentimes after the second or third day, they don't look anymore. There's an individual that's been missing for 3 weeks down here. His name is Caleb Harris out of Corpus Christi, Texas. They're not doing an extensive search like they did for Riley, and he's a college dude, you know? But it doesn't matter. I'm sure there's people looking, and they're not looking for the notoriety to show the world that they're looking. Not everything has to be placed on social media for you to be feeling good about yourself. Because if you need it in order to come from social media or some creator telling you how awesome you are, then that should tell you a lot. Because in this world, we need to be our own motivator, our own cheerleader, our own person who cares about us ourselves enough to get up and get going day in, day out. Because as Ethan Chapin's mom did say, life is short. Hold the ones close to you that are special. Because you just never know when you might get that phone call. I've gotten that phone call in the middle of the night more often than not about someone passing away. It's not a good phone call. Because you're left there in shock. Like, what am I hearing? Why are my ears ringing? Why do I feel like I'm about to pass out? Why do I want to puke? If you need information to make you feel better about what somebody goes through whenever they're hearing some bad news, there I gave it to you. Because that's usually what people do. They scream, they yell, they cuss, they throw themselves on the ground, and they go in shock. You guys, I hope that you enjoyed this. I'm just basically taking up time right now, and I know that you probably get tired of hearing my voice and my long banter, but that I've told you in many other videos, I'm a long talker because I am a therapist and I talk and talk and talk and talk. But sometimes it's okay to talk because it clears your head for other good things to come in. Y'all have a wonderful weekend. Hold your people close. Hold your people tight. Tell those people you're sorry that you have a grudge with. Tell the people you love them if you haven't. Call somebody and let them know that you're thinking about them. And try to take care of yourself the best you can and not let the ugliness of the world become your reality, because you know what? The more we seek ugly, the uglier we get. That's all I have for you tonight. You'll have an awesome day. Tomorrow and the next day. Sabrina, thank you so much for showing up in the chat. Too bad you didn't have more people to talk to, but I hope that your health is better and that things are getting better for you. And thank you for all the kind and wonderful comments that you place on my channel. I'm deeply appreciative. And for the rest of you, if I sound harsh on some of my commenting, that's just my personality. I'm very honest and blunt. I'm not harsh. I'm not vindictive. I'm not angry. I just don't have time for bullshit. I've spent a lot of time dealing with bullshit on my own. I just don't have a lot of time for it now. Well, that being